if CCTNS is required or not.
CCTNS was earlier something else. Before that, it was something else.
What was it before that? I am not aware. What was that before?
You should do the research. And
I am not. I am aware of it. CCTNS was nothing like that.
CCTNS had a different net before this. It had a different nomenclature, and that is well known.
See, as an industry body, my role when I work with the government is to ensure that there is an empowerment within the country, right? You can't be a same Gao kind of a place without building a infrastructure like the roads that are being happening, the metro rail that is happening. This is all empowerment that is required, and technology is doing that. We are working on smart grids today. So you don't. I mean, it's a next step, and whenever there is a next step, there would be hurdles, there would be issues, there would be crimes that would happen, and it has happened across the world. It has not happened only in India. You go back and study the American Revolution, you will see those things. It has happened before, and it is bound to happen in India. It is something that you cannot ignore.
So your industry body doesn't have a specific position on this?
No, I am not saying there is a specific position. I don't see it as a conflict of interest.
Because the industry gets to make money.
No, there is no point of industry making a money. Somebody has to implement it. Either you do it or I do it. Somebody has to do it, right?
My taxes are anyway.
No.
It's as interesting as this argument is getting. We have Mr. Asnani on the panel for our next session on cybersecurity, and I'm sure he'll be willing to answer all your questions then. We'd like to thank him for the special address and didn't run late anymore, so we would like to reconvene by 2:10. So I request all delegates and panelists to please be here. Lunch is on the ground floor. The panelists, Ms. Manogya Yelluri, Mr. Vikram Asnani, and Mr. Apar Gupta. And the session will be moderated by Ms. Napenai. I would like to welcome our new speakers. So I would like to welcome Mr. Apar Gupta. Session now to Ms. Napenai.
Thank you. We have a lunch session, so I think people will still be fairly alert. We have a very different topic for the afternoon session, and I'm also looking forward to hearing the speakers on this, as I'm sure you all are too. We are at a stage where we are looking at, a situation where something happens which shocks our conscience, and the immediate reaction you get from the government is, oh, we are coming up with a new law. The recent case, the recent instance for this is, of course, the cricket betting scandal. We had some certain cyber attacks, so you want to come out with some amendments to an act. You come out with a new act. You come out with clarifications post abuse of a particular provision, as in the guidelines for 666A. Now, what we have on hand, we were discussing for the afternoon session, is the National Cybersecurity Policy. Do we really need it? What is the purpose or intent or focus behind this? What is it going to really achieve? Can it do something that the Act itself has not been able to do, or is it there to supplement the Act, and in what manner? These are certain broad thoughts I think we could probably dwell on, and that's of course open to the speakers also to focus on as per their perspectives. But these are just some thoughts that came to my mind when I looked at this. So here we are to discuss the provisions of the National Cybersecurity Policy, its implications, its impact and efficacy. The first person who is going to take us through this journey is Manogya Yelluri. She has, of course, very ably moderated the earlier session for us, so she is not new to you all as such, but just a very brief introduction of Manogya. She is a practicing advocate and a legal researcher, alumni of UCLA and NALSA. She is, of course, in the present scenario of what we've just talked about of IPL, etc. She specializes in media, speech and technology, entertainment laws, gender justice, popular culture, and media, and she's involved in her initiative, which is intended to help independent artists in India to achieve best results from their works. Over to you, Manopya. For the earlier session, we will reserve questions for post all three speakers' sessions. Vikram may not be able to stay on till the end of the session. So if you have any specific questions and just before he leaves, if we can throw the floor open for a couple of questions, we would probably do that. Otherwise, the questions will be reserved for the end of the session.
Welcome back to the second session, I guess. This session, as most of you already know, deals with the National Cybersecurity Policy. Well, actually, in our programs, it would be the draft, but since just last week, it's sort of gone on record that the government's decided to adopt it. It's yet to be notified, so I'm afraid we're still working on the draft rules. And as Apar had actually pointed out, we have absolutely no idea about the comments that were sent in on this particular policy, and since they were never really made public on the website, the DIT website, nor do we actually know what the current state of the policy is as such, because we still have no access to it. So what I'm actually going to do in this presentation is really try and take you through some of the provisions of the policy that I felt were a little important, that stood out to me. And I understand that the program sort of deals with both a legal and the legal scope and the scope itself, the scope of action of the policy. And with reference to the legality of the policy, I think what I'm going to end up doing is probably pose a lot of questions, which I hope will serve well for the rest of the session as well. And hopefully, I'll get some answers as well. Why was there a need felt for it in the first place? As the previous speakers have been saying since the morning, there's been a lot of confusion with regards to laws in India and the way in which they are implemented. There's been a lot of confusion, especially with respect to this in the realm of cybersecurity. So I suppose that the government finally decided one day, because we all believe in better late than never, that it was time to probably come up with some kind of consolidated policy approach towards the issue of cyber security. The policy itself was drafted keeping in mind the fact that the government wanted to create some kind of structure with regards to the same. As you see in the course of this presentation, the infrastructure that the government is sort of trying to focus on through this policy is, interestingly enough, infrastructure that's also supposed to be relevant to training people and creating awareness and spreading awareness. So it's not just infrastructure in the sense of some kind of physical, tangible technological thing, but also in the sense of fostering some kind of human element as well. The policy itself sort of tries, see, this is what actually had me very amused when I read the policy, the draft policy. The first thing that the draft policy sort of is very quick to mention is that it considers IT this engine of growth, and how IT is extremely important, and how it's no laughing matter to sort of consider cybersecurity issues as pivotal to the country. What I did not understand when I read this policy was, isn't it a bit late to come up with a realization like this, especially an official stance like this, since it's already been since it's been many years? Why make it a public statement now? It's more or less like stating the obvious, and I don't sometimes like stating the obvious when it comes to policy statements, so I think maybe that's why I was a little confused when I read this at the first go. The policy itself very quickly talks about different key considerations. For starters, when it gets into promoting IT as such, it basically said that IT-based services are extremely integral to the governance of this country, because they play a huge role in public health services, education services, and financial services. It's a no-brainer, financial services being e-banking and the like. And what again amused me, this is probably the second thing that amused me about the policy in its first glance, was the fact that they had to choose to bring up the UID as an example, didn't they? So they've decided to sort of say that IT is so important because it's also a part of projects like the UID, and sort of indirectly I felt sanctioning or rather encouraging the fact that the UID is even happening in the first place. In an effort to create some kind of safe computing environment, which is supposed to be marked by trust and confidence, it was felt that this policy was needed, and this policy was necessarily needed to create some kind of harmony between different existing legal regimes and to sort of harmonize the domestic position on cybersecurity with international standards. Of course, we don't know what those international standards are because they aren't exactly mentioned in this policy, but again, I will deal with that in a little bit. The first thing about this particular policy when it comes to its key considerations, because these are considerations that have been mentioned in the policy itself. The policy sort of tries to focus, and this is in para 1.4 of the draft policy, if any of you are interested in looking. It sort of emphasizes these 5 characteristics. Firstly, that it's a mandatory issue that needs to be addressed, that's cybersecurity issues. Secondly, that there's a need for dynamic, contemporary, and effective solutions to cybersecurity threats. Thirdly, that there should be an emphasis on cybersecurity intelligence, wherein the policy predicts, or the policy hopes to achieve a state where there is enough cybersecurity intelligence, so to say, enough intelligence, enough infrastructure, to not just counter attacks, but also to prevent them, and most importantly, to also be able to trace it back to the perpetrators. The fourth key policy consideration refers to a creation of an effective crisis management strategy, which again, the policy is quick to reassure us will depend and differ on the basis of the kind of crisis that you meet. In other words, the policy envisages that there will be a situation where different crisis management situations will evolve based on different priorities and different needs. So is it a one-for-all? Is it not a one-for-all? We're still a little out on this because this policy has a wide-reaching scope, but at the same time makes it absolutely clear that it will look at different acts of different threats of cybersecurity differently. Finally, as I mentioned earlier to you, it also looks into building up infrastructure, both human and technological. In the course of actually listing these different policy considerations, the policy goes ahead and says that there are different kinds of threats to cybersecurity. So it's acknowledging threats from different countries, it's acknowledging threats from different sources, which I personally think is quite refreshing because at least it goes to the extent of, sort of taking a wider canvas, a wider look at the policy itself. It's also meant to target all kinds of IT users, and they've explicitly mentioned that in the policy by talking about users at home versus users in bigger industries and corporations. The policy also goes ahead and acknowledges the complexity of the threats that are being made, and depending on the complexity of those threats, actually goes ahead and tries to seek new strategies, and which is why they've emphasized dynamic, contemporary, and effective solutions. If you look at the language of the policy itself, it clearly says that it wants to go beyond the traditional firewall and the virus scans, which is alarming because why would you choose that to compare things to, but still. And they decide to go ahead and try and look for dynamic, contemporary, effective solutions, but the policy does not really elaborate on what these might be. When it comes to emphasis on cybersecurity intelligence to anticipate, counter, and attribute attacks, this particular goal of the policy has been met with some criticism, especially with reference to trying to trace back an act, a cybersecurity threat, so to say. Probably because we do not seem to have the right kind of infrastructure is what a lot of critics seem to claim. it's not something that I think we've been very good at, because we seem to be wrongly convicting people, or wrongly blaming people, rather, that's a better word, for different acts, and not actually being able to trace it back to the right perpetrators. Effective crisis management strategies, essentially, the policy doesn't particularly elaborate on that, and I'm not entirely sure what they mean either, especially since they've created some kind of hierarchy with the different kinds of the different kinds of cybersecurity threats that are made available. Another very interesting thing that the policy has done is that it has gone ahead and acknowledged critical information infrastructure. Now, this is interesting because I think the government is sort of trying to establish a holistic view of how IT works, and hence how far-reaching the effects of cybersecurity threats can actually be. Obviously, for starters, their first target is defense, because that's the thing that sort of riles us all up. Is it going to be a crisis which involves countries and might actually end up becoming some kind of cyber warfare? That's one of their major concerns. Finance, energy, transportation, and telecommunication are also other industry areas that they have gone ahead and recognized. This is all, of course, in paragraph 3, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason why this is relevant is because once you understand the kind of infrastructure that the policy is aiming to address, you will also understand that they have to come up with different strategies for different kinds of infrastructure, which at the moment I'm not sure they're capable of. The other interesting thing about that I noticed about the policy was the implementation of security best practices. Now, this is something that is that's new and that's interesting, because I'm not sure if best practices and the internet have ever really gone hand in hand when it comes to the Indian experience, so to say. Para 3.31A of the policy deals with all of these different kinds of best practices. I'm not really going to get into reading them all out because they're already in the policy, and I'd rather we kept going. The major change, of course, to being implemented here centers on, well, there's one major implementation change that they have is basically the appointment of Chief Information Security Officers. Basically, Chief Information Security Officers are supposed to be like contact people. So every organization, it's supposed to be a best practice. Every organization has to appoint a high-level senior management person as a Chief Information Security Officer. And this Chief Information Security Officer basically becomes your nodal point with the certain and basically should sort of communicate with them as regards the situation of any kind of cyber threat or any cybersecurity issues, or if they need any information with regards to cybersecurity. Okay, another interesting thing is the creation of an Information Security Assurance Network. Now, the Information Security Assurance Network, I feel, is something that maybe my co-panelists would probably be able to elaborate on a bit more. The most that I've understood really from a reading of the policy was that you can have two kinds of actions under an Information Security Assurance Network based on what the policy sort of envisages. One refers to enabling actions, which, as you can see, refer to promotional, advisory, or regulatory actions which involve the publication of a national security policy compliance requirements, and different guidelines or documentation. The other form in which the actions can sort of take place is through endorsing actions, which are essentially commercial in nature and involve more than one service provider offering commercial services after having fulfilled requisite qualification criteria. So it's sort of like saying theory versus practice. You come up with guidelines, you come up with documentation, you come up with standards, etc., that different industries can actually adhere to. And with reference to endorsing actions, you go ahead and actually make sure that when you do stuff, you are actually, conforming to the guidelines that have been laid down. assessment and certification, IT security product evaluation, IT manpower. These are also things that have been recognized under the ambit of an information security assurance network. Essentially, with reference to an assessment and certification requirement, what basically is contemplated is that there's some kind of international standard that's used to sort of evaluate and then certify different IT services or IT products, so that you know that they're actually sticking to a particular standard and they're not just some random thing. IT security product evaluation also follows the same logic. Again, it's about certifying it with respect to a particular international standard. And finally, with regards to IT manpower, essentially with reference to IT manpower, it's what I had mentioned at the onset. It's where people are aware of what cybersecurity is, so that they can actually prevent things from happening before they have to resort to some kind of legal remedy. Okay. So as you can see, there's a lot in the policy which I'm afraid has to really be read and understood, at the moment at least, because we still don't know what the intentions behind them were. We understand that the policy was sort of drafted to consolidate an approach and make it official on the part of the government, to say this is how we're treating IT. And this apparently was also done to sort of make it easier for other international organizations and countries for that matter, to have a bit more faith in the Indian experience, because India is really opening up in the global market. And it was thought that this policy would actually go ahead and aid in building up the country's reputation.